Is there like any possibility we can shift it to Google Meet?
If there's an issue with joining Zoom, I suppose we can move to Discord if everyone's okay with that. So I think we can move to the Intertext Discord server just to be able to have the round move forward with all speakers. So if we could all join room 1, that would be great.
Okay.
Wait, sorry. Hi. CG is having some technical issues with our Discord, like applications for some reason. So can you give us a while, maybe 5 minutes to solve this?
Can you do it in 3 minutes?
Sure, we'll try, but no guarantees.
All right, because if these
Hello, she's there. Chair.
Oh, she's in the Zoom.
I'm so sorry for the delay.
No worries. Since the LO is present, and the tech issues of CG was pertaining to Discord, I assume that means we can start since we'll just be having it on Zoom instead. So no need to transfer to Discord. I guess without further ado, we could start this round. So again, I'm DJ Salud. I'll be the chair for this round. Alongside me is a panelist, Chael. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi. Sorry. I'm paneling this round. Congrats everyone. Good luck.
Yes. So good luck to the debaters. Without further ado, I guess we could kick this off. So debating the motion, this House hopes that developed nations will invest more in nuclear energy. I would like to call on the Prime Minister to start off this debate. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. The world is on track to have a human population of 100 billion by the year 2100. If we don't meet the energy needs of such a large population, it eventually will face a situation where the world as we know it might collapse. In the current status quo, there are numerous growing industries where we see a technological explosion in the past 60 years, with the rise of new technologies such as AI demanding more and more power as the human race continues to develop. As we enter an era of climate change, we also have to combat this with technologies such as air conditioning, just to prevent the loss of life due to heat stroke or carbon capture, increasing the amount of energy demand that the world has to use. As the world also increases in a growing affluence, where there will be more consumer demand of products over a larger period of time, leading to more resources needed to be extracted and more energy to meet this demand. Furthermore, in countries around the world, development is accelerating and urbanization is increasing as more and more people move to the cities to get more jobs. All of these activities require energy, which the world cannot provide for, and is only currently scraping by extracting as much gas and oil as possible to burn to generate electricity. This will be done through fracking and drilling, which leads to a lot of accidents and oil spills, leading to loss of life and also damage to the ecosystem. It's also an incredibly inefficient process in which a lot of heat is wasted and let off into and also where pollution and carbon dioxide and waste products are let off into the air, leading to diseases around the world which are caused by this energy generation process. However, we have a very simple solution of nuclear, right? But this has been painted as malicious as possible by the media due to high-profile accidents that happened 50 plus years ago. As such, in places like in Germany, the voter base doesn't want to invest into it and instead are actively working against nuclear by decommissioning the already limited number of nuclear facilities, right? As we can tell, nuclear energy is actually very energy dense and is quite abundant to mine. We can tell by the booming uranium mining industries in China because of how mature this technology is, having been invented over quite about 80 years ago, right? A 1 kilogram chunk of enriched uranium is able to power a city for many months. And because of this energy density, nuclear power plants don't have to be refueled often and only needed to be refueled by a small amount that will last a very long time and generate a lot of energy within one plant. This means that one nuclear power plant can replace several other coal and oil power plants, leading to a greater overall energy production that can be sustained for a very long time. In fact, nuclear is also very clean because it is made by the process. Energy is created by the process of fission. It only heats up water to spin turbines, similar to how other coal power plants, but instead of burning oil, they use nuclear reactions.
AI.
Fundamentally, there will only be a generation of steam. Yes, I'll take your point.
You must understand, we are talking about developed nations right now. Why is it that developed nations really have to focus on energy that costs a lot in the first place?
I'll get to this. So, the reason why rich countries are uniquely suitable to use nuclear is because they already have a strong infrastructure put in place. They have a strong power grid to be able to efficiently distribute power efficiently across the country. They also have the capabilities to invest, since the governments are generally quite rich and they have a lot of spare excess funds to invest into these technologies. And they also have a unique entrepreneurship environment where different companies, as we have already seen about the small modular nuclear power plants that are being invested into right now, they create a very competitive economic environment for nuclear to bloom. Furthermore, nuclear is the only technology that doesn't rely on fossil fuels, that is the most mature one out there, being invented again over 80 years ago. And we already have several power plants and several safety systems put into place that make it a very reliable source of energy, something that other renewable technologies have been too young to be able to solve their own problems of. Continuing about how nuclear is clean, the only waste that is generated is nuclear waste, which in fact the 96% of it can be recycled and turned into new fuel. So we already have a very efficient system of capturing energy, and this can be further enhanced by how this can be recovered into new fuel, right? Leading to a very small amount of nuclear waste, which is being handled, no thank you, by countries like France. The reason why new renewable technologies are unable to compete with nuclear is because we've already mentioned how there's little research done into them, and the cost of it is still relatively high compared to coal power plants. So as a result of things like corporate lobbying, corporate lobbying against the government, there'll be little funding against renewable energy, and renewable energy can only increase in small amounts, unable to keep up with the rapid change of climate change, right? Because corporations is very easy to press down this sort of gradual change. Furthermore, the materials for renewable energy is costly simply due to the fact that a single piece of, for example, a wind turbine or solar panel isn't able to generate that much energy. So by compensating, nuclear compensates for this by having a large amount of initial upfront cost, but actually a smaller cost over a long-term time, right? And particularly for technologies like solar panels or like wind turbines, you need a huge amount of raw materials that still have to be mined. For example, silicon for solar panels that actually devastate like deserts and rivers, right? Or aluminum, which is also a very costly material to mine and leads to a lot of terrible byproducts for the environment, right? Similarly, another reason is because second reason why renewables are not suitable is because they are completely unreliable and dependent on the weather. And especially when you're powering cities in a very urban environment in these first world countries that we're talking about, these technologies simply aren't able to catch up, or like there are no battery technologies able to catch up to this to mitigate this problem. Furthermore, it's also extremely location dependent. If side or opposition tries to bring up about hydro and wind turbines, those can only be put in places where wind or hydroelectric power is very consistently generated. Furthermore, even these technologies were claimed to be renewable and green to the environment to still damage the environment because of things like hydro, like affecting the ecosystem, while nuclear is a very small power plant and can be easily integrated into the system that's already existing, which is what developed nations should be aiming for. In fact, nuclear still beats out every single other renewable energy source in cost. So because renewable energies are far too long-term, and because that they take a long time to implement, they're completely out of the election cycle, and the voters simply don't care about it, making it extremely difficult for politicians to make change. But nuclear power is the only solution that can tide us over in the short term, so that we are able to fix the problems that are currently available with renewable energy. And because nuclear energy is the fastest way to solve this problem, developed nations should invest in it.
I would like to thank the Prime Minister for the fine speech. Now I would like to call on the Leader of Opposition to begin the opposition side of the House here.
Right, just 3 seconds. Okay, so Riddhima Sharma going as the leader of opposition, preferred pronouns she, her, starting at the self count of 3, 2, 1, start. Now, panel, firstly, let me tell you what these developed countries actually look like, right? Let's understand that these developed countries are countries that have actually went through a lot of development. Now, what does that mean, right? That means that these countries have been through a lot of infrastructural change, that these countries have been through, a lot of social change, that these countries have been through a lot of infrastructural change, especially. That is to say that infrastructure in these kind of countries is something that you have to be very careful about before making it, because there are already so many of them existing. But also that when we talk about investment here, right, what does investment mean? Panel, let's understand that when we talk about nuclear energy, right, nuclear power plants, etc., the amount of money and the amount of investment that you're supposed to make is higher on a comparative than any other power source, simply because a you're actually going to go ahead and mine these said nuclear sources, and then there's a very heavy extensive process in not only generating these energies but also disposing the said waste, right? Coming to some rebuttals that the side for opposition does very conveniently come here and claim. They come here and tell you that nuclear energy is very clean energy, it would be better for the environment and that it would actually help the environment. Panel, let's firstly understand that is simply not the case. When we talk about nuclear, when we talk about other sources of renewable energy, right, what do? They are cleaner sources simply because we are not mining anything. They come here and contend upon like how there's a heavy reliance on fossil fuels now burning that causes a lot of harmful effects. But panel, let's understand that even for nuclear power plants, we are going to be mining. We are going to, we are going to have to extract these said elements from earth, and as long as that is the case, there is going to be a lot of climate pollution and a lot of environmental damage that happens at that level. Ahead of that level, panel, there are a lot of other fold harmful impacts on the environment that I would be covering further in my speech. Now, secondly, they come here and tell you that renewable energy is new and that it has more money. I've already told you that it actually does not take that much money, because the entire extraction process from the earth's surface, etc., is taken away. So that part is not something we have to cater to. Secondly, the entire waste disposal system is something also that we don't have to cater to, right? So that is exactly why. And thirdly, panel, let's understand, right, these are developed countries. They have money, they have people who are smart, they have technological advancement. Panel, as long as that is the case, these are the countries who should invest way more in renewable energies instead of going ahead and making nuclear energy their main source of energy generation. Now, coming to constructives here, panel, let's understand that when there's such a high investment that we're asking, we're asking where exactly is the government going to get it from? Obviously, it's people. It's going to increase its taxes in one way or another, right? What does that do? This could result in people having more taxes to pay and hence more backlash on the government. And secondly, also, it could also become an economic burden simply because there's such high investment that you need there. Secondly, panel, let's understand the kind of accidents that could occur when we talk about nuclear energy and power plants. Panel, we are already aware of Chernobyl. We are already aware of Bhopal gas tragedy, etc., that the world has already seen. Why is that the case? That is the case simply because nuclear energy is something that you cannot control to a certain extent. Sure, you could put measures, but you never know what could happen, because the process of nuclear power plants and how the energy is created is something that is so spontaneous, is something that has so much energy that it could go out of control at any point of time. And when it is happening in a developed nation, let's understand that the kind of harm that they could then cause to the economy and to the society at large and global extent is way more. Thirdly, let's talk about waste management and filtration, which is a very big point here. Let's understand the kind of waste, nuclear waste especially, that is then generated and how it is disposed is very important when it comes to nuclear power plants. That is exactly what
Point of
you
information.
not taking that right now. Please don't unmute yourself. Uh, uh, when we talk about renewable energy, that is something that we don't even have to cater to, right? As long as that is the case, panel, waste management in nuclear power plants becomes a very important part, because this nuclear waste causes so many diseases, causes so many problems that a whole piece of land could literally become barren. That people and the population of that said country could have genetic issues, could have so many other issues, and also the workers who would be working in this said nuclear power plant would get even worse off. Thirdly, panel, let's understand about security of the said developed nation and international tension. Panel, let's understand whenever something nuclear is talked about, the whole world looks at it, right? So, since it is something that is so spontaneous, it is something that is so out of control, it is something could be, becomes a place where terrorists could attack, which could become a point where which could become a weak point for that developed nation. And secondly, panel, let's understand there would be international tension. The whole world has your view on it. They would try to stop you from making all of that, right? So, and let's talk about how long-term impact is more on our side of the paradigm. Simply because, panel, let's understand, on our side of the paradigm, things are not extracted from the earth, right? What we're here trying to do is work way more on renewable energy, simply because developed nations have the resources, they have the investment to make sure that they can go ahead and invest more in the said renewable energy, instead of going ahead and choosing nuclear energy, which could then turn very detrimental for them. With that, very proud to oppose.
I would like to thank the Leader of Opposition for the fine speech. Now, I would like to call on the Deputy Prime Minister to further their case. Here.
Hi, can I check that I'm audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you. POIs verbally, please. I will not be checking the chat. I find it absolutely abhorrent that from PM, we immediately give you close to 1 to 2 minutes of characterization and analysis as to why things like overpopulation, the advancement of technology, the growing of industries, the growing affluence of people, and things like growing urbanization and urban growth is something that will plague humanity for at least the next 100 years, because this means that the human race is going to continue to grow and that there's going to be even more people who demand even more energy. We are going to need so much energy in the future that cannot be dealt with simply through renewables, as PM characterized and explained. What was the response to this? There was absolutely no response. Their only feeble response is, oh, we're going to use things like renewables to make up for it. As we've already explained since PM, there are a lot of problems with renewable as to why they're unable to make up for nuclear. And I find it really weird they talk about things like the infrastructure and how we need to be very careful, given that renewables require one of the largest amounts of surface areas in order to change the infrastructure. If you're talking about infrastructural change, you're literally talking about putting solar panels on like close to every single building, or even creating space just to put solar panels, just to put wind turbines, just to put a dam which already has terrible ecological impacts. If they want to talk about infrastructure, we clearly win on that point. Let's deal with their attacks on us before looking at their substantive material. They talk about how, in response to us telling you how nuclear is a lot cleaner and a lot better than current existing technologies, what do they say? They say, but in renewables, you don't actually have to mine anything, and that's why it's definitely cleaner. This is simply not true. As PM already characterized, to do things like even build the solar panels, you need things like steel, aluminum, tin, for things like wind turbines, or things like your dams, etc. All of these still require materials, and at the end of the day, this still goes through a similar process to things like coal. I'll take that later. So when you go through this process, you similarly require all of the emissions, all of the carbon emissions that doing things like burning coal and natural gas will give you. Albeit, yes, it might be more long-term and more sustainable, but the problem is that right now, it doesn't work because this technology is so young that it still requires a lot of coal and a lot of carbon emissions. They talk about how mining uranium is really terrible because you still have to mine it. I just want to firstly mitigate this largely by saying that because uranium is so incredibly energy dense, you really do not have to mine for a very long time or mine at all, mine a lot at all, because you're able to, within 1 kg of uranium, satisfy the needs of many, many cities for a very long time. But also because when in the process of mining uranium, we think that there's going to be a lot more precautions, to be a lot more careful, because uranium is currently already seen as something that's dangerous. And I'll show you that why this is likely to make it more clean and more safe later on. Regarding what the OO tried to bring to us, they brought us three main pieces of substantive. Firstly, how there is a very high upfront cost. Secondly, on why it's unsafe and leads to things like terrorist attacks. And thirdly, regarding disposal. I want to deal with the first and third. Regarding the high upfront cost, they talk about why building a nuclear energy plant will lead to more things like taxes because states have to fund it more. Firstly, I'd like to note that these are developed countries, which likely, as long as there's a political impetus and political capital to do this, there is not that much increase in terms of how the fiscal burden to the government. Secondly, because you are diverting funds from coal and natural gas in our side to like, for example, in Australia, diverting funds away from like letting Shell and Santos do oil fracking and moving on to renewable energy, we think we are far better because of that, and we are able to get the funding because of that. And thirdly, by the comparative, they are also using renewable energy. So I really do not get the point where they say that renewable energy is going to have a lot lower upfront costs, given that they also want to use this. And note here the very important analysis that wasn't dealt with by people, which is why because of corporate lobbying within countries like Australia, where literally Santos and Shell have control over both sides of the government, both parties, what ends up happening is oil fracking and drilling continue to happen. What we need is a shock. What we need is a very short-term reward gain. What we need is nuclear, which is able to give you all of this energy in a very fast time. That's how you're able to combat the very strong force of corporate lobbying, which currently will not allow renewable energy to grow at such a fast pace. I want to take a point from closing.
You must understand. The building of like power plants going to take billions of money to do so with all of these investments. So how is it that building renewable infrastructure is going to be much more harmful than power plants?
Well, okay, if you want to talk about cost, let's talk about cost, right? Because currently, not only did my PM empirically just tell you that the cost in terms of CO2 per kg is a lot like greater in terms of for renewables, which means if you want to talk about cost, the cost to the environment is already gigantic. But if you want to talk about actual monetary cost, we're telling you that because this is a one-time cost that will pay itself off in the future, there is a lot of incentive for government to currently continue doing it. If you want to talk about the billions of dollars, I want to point you to the fact that renewable energy literally requires you to put in so many solar panels, put in so many wind turbines to fulfill the needs of your city. That is also going to cost mammoths a gigantic amount of money. You can't simply just say because nuclear costs billions, renewable won't cost billions. Let's talk about disposal, which O wanted to bring up. Firstly, I just want to note that countries like France, which already have 200 plus power plants as characterized by PM, are only disposing about 4% of their actual nuclear waste, which is to say that I'm going to largely mitigate this, but I'm going to even further mitigate this by telling you and mechanizing how power plants actually deal with waste. What they do is that they store this nuclear waste, which by the way, nuclear waste is what only happens is at the very, very end. It's not anything particularly radioactive. And what ends up happening is that they store it in concrete in a very, very safe area. And what then happens is after 10 years, it disappears and you can very, very safely dispose of it because at that point, it is no longer radioactive. And this brings me to my third substantive as to why this is far safer, why nuclear is far safer. Let's talk about nuclear. What do they currently see? Firstly, because of the irrational fear of nuclear within the database as PM characterized, there is a huge amount of over-regulation and check and balances within them. This looks like backup systems. This looks like control rods, which have been improved since the time of previous nuclear power plant fails, and even literally thorium reaction plants within China, which literally they cannot fail because you will need to melt salt to fail. But also because things like emissions is only steam, and therefore you're saving your workers which are working there from lung cancer. And thirdly, because there is often a lot less exploitation of workers because you don't need as much manpower to man one single nuclear power plant, which is a lot more centralized as compared to many other like coal plants. Let's talk about coal. There's often a lot less regulation, a lot higher emissions, and a lot higher exploitation of workers. This looks like things like child labor and sweatshops where they're literally forced to work in the mines and inhale soot. Even renewable energy, you still have to mine for these material, and therefore the impacts of safety are incredibly similar to coal. At the end of the day, when oil tells you that it will go out of control, this is a complete lie because nuclear energy has so many checks and balances, it is bound to succeed.
I would like to thank the Deputy Prime Minister for the fine speech. Now, I would like to call on the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue their case here.
I'll take 30 seconds.
Sure thing.
Hello, and panel, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
So, greetings everyone. Swastik this side, preferred pronouns he, they. For POIs, just write them down in the chat. Please don't unmute yourself. I'll shortly take one, preferably from the diagonal, starting with a self count of 3, 2, and 1. So, panel, look, these developed countries are in a certain position where they have met their short-term interest, and that is the main reason they are developed countries. And now what they want is a better long-term tangible impact, which is like only at the side paradigm of opening opposition, because we tell you how this renewable energy would provide a certain sort of long-term tangible impact, which is the basic need of these developed countries, because they have met their short-term things or anything like that. Furthermore, I'll start with a certain sort of rebuttals to the opening government panel. Look, right, what opening government comes up and say that, right, yes, this renewable energy would be like would require less people, and like these people would require less people, and like less people would be employed into it and require less number of people. But buying into their framing, they themselves come up and say that, right, in a developed country there is a large population, government has to cater a large population. Then the basic problem or basic question which I have in my mind is that, right, from where you will be producing this employment. And panel, look, I'll provide you twofold impacts of it. Firstly, people would not let you like set up power because people would be giving a large amount of tax which they don't want to give. Secondly, they would be they would be like getting laid off, they would be losing their jobs, and that is the second reason why people would not opt into this power plant. Thirdly, it is about, right, their personal deterrence as well as safety concerns. And we know that there is a sort of stigma attached to nuclear power in the whole society after Chernobyl disaster or anything like which happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So people have a certain sort of deterrence towards this say nuclear power plant. So it would not be an incentive for these governments to like go against the people, those who are basic, like those who are voter bank for them to go against them in order to set up a nuclear power plant. For this three simple reasons, I don't believe government would opt in into buy I don't hope that government would opt into this nuclear power plant for this simple reason, because they don't want deterrence from people because they want to come into the power. Secondly, taking them over like cost efficiency or anything like that. Finally, from the on the very first note, what these nuclear power plants require is a large amount of investment in the very initial stage, which either you get you yes, you are a developed nation, but you don't have an amount of money, you don't have millions or billions to invest into these nuclear power plants for the simple reason, because you have to cater the infrastructure as well as you have to cater the people also. So for this simple reason, either you increase your taxation or you go and get some money from outside, say IMF or anything like that. And panel, I'll prove you why this is not the right thing to do. But side opposition come up and they say that the nuclear waste is don't have the nuclear waste does not have radioactive material, which is flawed in their sense, because this material has good amount of radioactive material, which is highly harmful for the people, as well as it requires a large decomposition cost. Catering their point of a developed country, where is n number of developed infrastructure. What you need a proper dumping space for for this material, where people don't go, or where people don't come in contact with it, which is not possible because it is a developed country. It has large amount of infrastructure. It has large number of people. Secondly, over decomposition cost. Why it is not a good thing in long term aspect? For the simple reason, decomposition cost is really high. They themselves come and say that this decomposition would be safe. This decomposition would be under checks and balances. But that is the main thing, panel. That check and balances, that safety net or anything like that require a large amount of investment, because without that this decomposition cannot happen. So it has a large amount of decomposition cost also, which makes it costlier in long term aspect also. Thirdly, over uranium. Panel, look, these nuclear power plants run on uranium. So firstly, you damage the climate by drilling uranium. And even if I buy their argument, 1 kg of uranium can run a large number of houses or anything like that. But panel, what after that uranium? Uranium is not present in a sufficient amount on Earth. So for this simple reason, it does not make a long time reliable thing, because if we keep on using uranium, it is a non-renewable resource and it requires a large amount of time to form again. So it is not good in a long term. Furthermore, taking it on geopolitical aspect or anything like that, panel, look, every country has a certain sort of deterrence towards nuclear power plant. A country building a nuclear power plant, the other neighbors would surely have a certain sort of deterrence towards it, and they would try to call out these countries for setting up nuclear power plants or setting up developing nuclear energy or anything like that. And that is the main issue. This country would be getting a certain sort of deterrence from all over the world, which we don't want in our side paradigm, and which a person who is running the government would also not want, because then people would vote him out into the next election. Before moving further, any pick your diagonal 3, 2, 1, OG 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. Moving further, panel, I'll prove you why the points given by opening government are flawed in themselves and create a lot of harm to the people. So panel, secondly, on harm of people. Panel, even if I consider everything is done on a very safety net, as well as everything is done, then also panel, there is no certain sort of long-term tangible impact, because investment into renewable energy is only the long-term tangible impact, as well as and as well as it is easy also, as well as cost efficient also, because it is renewable. You keep on getting solar energy from sun, or you keep on getting wind energy. And why it is easy for government to opt into it, because it does not require a large amount of labor cost and anything like that. And over backlash from people also, people losing jobs, or people not getting a certain sort of paying a large amount of tax requires a large amount of planning, which cannot be done on a short-term basis, and we require a long-term tangible impact. So, panel, why opening government is totally out of this debate, because they never prove me so as to how where they get these funding. And even if they get this funding, how they will maintain this decomposition cost, or how they will maintain this certain sort of uranium, how they will cater to the geopolitical aspect or waste management or anything like that. Furthermore, why we take this debate? Because we hope that government would be taking care of its position and would not go against people as well as the environment as a whole. With all these reasons, proudly opposed.
I would like to thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for the fine speech. Now, to begin the closing half of the debate, I'd like to call on the Member of Government here.
Hi, can I check if I'm audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, give me a while to set up my timer. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So at the very beginning of this speech, I want to point out the very glaring deadlock in opening, which is about whether nuclear is viable and whether it's good. I think if my math is correct, the opening speakers have spent half an hour on this topic. I'm going to show you why this is completely irrelevant. So to start off, OG talks about nuclear fission, why it's very efficient. They talk about how upfront cost is less when you use nuclear. They talk about raw materials like aluminum. They talk about integration. They talk about overpopulation. Then OO sees this and responds by talking about how nuclear has high costs, that nuclear waste is going to be caused when you dump the uranium into the water or whatever, that extraction is going to cause environmental damage and pollution, and how it's unsafe. So I'm going to give you 2 points of strategic analysis that locks opening opposition right out of this debate at the very get-go. First reason is because they focus on the wrong thing, because they focus on the current state of nuclear rather than how nuclear is going to be. Because note here that developed nations have research, they have resources, and they're likely to be able to mitigate all of these whatever safety harms, even if you buy that, because nuclear is going to evolve once governments spend funding on it, once governments devote attention to it. Second reason, and underline this by the way, is that societal impacts are the most important. They neglect this, and opening half loses because of the deadlock, because they asked the wrong question. They talk about whether nuclear is good, but the main question here is the environment, and we do that better because of the comprehensive social impacts that we offer to you, which I'm going to talk about in my extension. So opening half is locked out on 2 fronts. First, because they focus on the current state of nuclear rather than how it's likely to develop. Second, because societal impacts are the most important and we do that better. So even if you don't buy all of this, I'm going to lock OO out on account of their content and their blatant lies. Yeah, I have time, so I'll do that. So by the way, all this material is already invalid, by the way, from opening opposition, because first, opening government has already rebutted it, and second, I've locked them out based on strategy. But yeah, first, opening opposition talks about money. But first thing to note here is that nuclear is an upfront cost, so it's a fixed cost. So after that, the energy per dollar is better for nuclear rather than renewable energy like wind and solar, as opening government has correctly pointed out. Because after you build a reactor, you just need to mine small amounts of uranium. But if you are using wind turbines or solar panels, you need to build millions of those on every apartment building or on every beach. So so money is probably better on our side. But even if you don't buy that, we're willing to trade it off because we think that developed nations probably have the money to fund this, considering the overall gain in the long run. Second thing OO says is on safety. First thing I'd like to note here is that the examples they use probably suggest that they don't know much about the topic. DLO talks about Hiroshima when talking about safety. I think that's quite absurd. But second thing to note here is that this doesn't actually happen anymore. Developed countries have expertise in managing nuclear reactors or whatever. They learn from the mistakes like Fukushima and Chernobyl. That's why Chernobyl doesn't happen every other year, because people who have nuclear reactors actually learn from those and they have safety measures to prevent that from happening again. No, thank you. POIs in the chat, please. Third, this barely happens because of this is the safety issue is way overblown because of media sensationalization and fear mongering. Of course, the media is going to zero in on the safety issues and say, hey, yeah, nuclear is so bad, we're all going to die, because that's what sells them the most newspapers and that's what gets them the most views. Take a look at France. It's been using nuclear and nuclear reactors for 60 years, integrating nuclear reactors into Paris and all its major cities. Nothing has happened. Nuclear is safe. Third thing opposition says is on land efficiency. But Crucially, nuclear reactors intuitively take up less space. Like, for example, you need hundreds or thousands of kilometers of coastline in Brazil to actually have wind turbines, and like it's probably easier to integrate into power grids and cities. Like, final thing opening opposition says is that like it comes out in DLO is that people are scared of nuclear. First thing I'd like to note is that it's a rational fear. So we can easily out policy this by educating people about nuclear. And even if you don't buy this, the government has the fiat to do it anyway. Because we have the fiat to assume that the government is able to just carry out the investment in nuclear anyway. And after some time, when there are no safety issues and like a second Chernobyl doesn't actually happen, people will realize that nuclear is actually safe and they'll be fine with it. So this is also out. So I've taken opening opposition and opening half as a whole out of this debate on both strategy and content. But now I'm going to move on to our unique contribution and our extension, which I'm going to prove why it's so debate-worthy. So the first thing here is on our extension, which is on the precedent, the message sent, and destigmatization. Framing here is that developed nations have influence. So they have a lot of political influence. If the US does something, I try to follow it so I can get more funding from the US, or like the US can military support me militarily. And developed countries have economic influence. So let's say if the US announces that they're going to invest in nuclear, companies are going to try and appeal to that to get more funding from the US government. And note here that this is unique because we're focusing on the societal impact of investing in nuclear rather than the specific traits of nuclear. So that we're unique from opening in that way. The impacts are fivefold. First is on job creation. And I think this is pretty intuitive because traditional jobs are being phased out slowly, like these coal mining and coal mining, whatever. Second impact here is on environmental and technological research because it sets a precedent for action that the government is actually serious about managing the environment, and companies are going to try and appeal themselves to the government to try and get more funding, and funding actually happens. Third impact is on other nations because large nations intuitively have a lot of geopolitical capital, and so we're likely to be able to globalize nuclear once big countries are actually integrated into their society. Fourth tier of impact is on awareness, and the premise here is that government rhetoric is an avenue of social change. So think about it, like the average American doesn't understand nuclear, he doesn't understand climate change, and he doesn't understand the environment. So what this means is that when the government pushes an agenda of nuclear investment, we're going to destigmatize nuclear, and Americans can play their part in protecting the environment once they know more about it. And fifth impact here, very briefly, since I'm running out of time, is on tech sharing, because developed countries can help developing countries with adoption because they have a unique incentive to do so through gaining political power and networking and geopolitics in today's bipolar world. And note here is that nuclear is the best avenue to generate the optimal amount of social impact, something that opposition cannot claim when they talk about wind power and solar power and wind turbines, whatever, because they show that humans can utilize new tech safely that was previously thought to be unsafe, and it encourages innovation. So at the end of my extension, at the end of my speech, I want to do I'm just going to conclude. I've locked opening half out of the debate. I've locked opening opposition specifically out of the debate and taken down all their material. Third, I've proven that we raise awareness and set a precedent for nuclear research and environmental research. Fourth, I've proven that we create tangible change through societal means. We think that's what's most important. So proud to propose.
I would like to thank the member of government for their fine speech. Now, to begin the closing opposition case, I'd like to call on the member of opposition here.
Just before moving, am I loud and audible?
Yes, you're loud and audible.
Right. So I'll be accepting POIs verbally. If you have any POI, you can unmute yourself. Right. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, this debate is not just trickled down on presenting your PowerPoint slides as to why nuclear is better than renewable energy and vice versa. Rather, it is about whether or not the priority on government's incentives should be directed to nuclear energy or other aspects that can prosper life in these developed nations, as they say how in the next 50 years the population of these developed nations are going to increase significantly. Before I move on, a few things I'll be doing my speech today. Firstly, I'll be giving a clear frame on how this debate actually looks like on the opposition side. Secondly, I'll be rebutting everything that is said by the government batch. Thirdly, I'll be extending a few points coming from our opening half, and lastly, giving off our own substantive. Now, towards the framing of this debate, to make you understand a little bit more better, how do we like tie these developed nations and to their energies in general? Like, we tell you that they already have enough energy around their premise to sustain residents. It's safe to say that they also have built plenty of power plants around their country, considering that it's an adaptation of these developed nations. Sure, with investments, you open researchers relating nuclear energy, but the trade-off here is that these are developed nations. They have nothing to lose. In other words, there is no point for you to invest in nuclear energy when we tell you that these developed nations, the keyword here is that they already have enough energy in the first place. We tell you that what is the alternative of like these investments if we are not focusing on nuclear energy? We tell you that first of all, there is no demand for energy in these like developed nations in the first place, and we tell you it's better for government to invest on problems within these developed nations, such as like medium-sized enterprises not getting enough capital, or like low density areas are not getting enough subsidies. We tell you there is a clear framing of what opposition advocates for when it comes to the allocation of investment funds. Right now, what does opposition side wants at the end of the day? We tell you at a macro scale, we want an efficient allocation of investments to things that can prosper lives in the next 50 years, such as getting enough subsidies for people living in low density areas, or giving out allocation of funds to medium-sized enterprises so that they can mark up in the free market. Right? And lastly, Pam, you must understand that this debate needs to be tied back to these developed nations, something that the opening half and even member of government failed to do. We must understand that when it comes to energy and these developed nations, they already have enough. They are talking as if there's an energy crisis in these developed nations. Sure, we have energy crisis in Malaysia, but have you ever heard about USA or UK talking about energy crisis? No, right? Because they are not going to that phase of like they are not getting enough energy, considering that if it's not just nuclear energy, they also have renewable energy at the end of the day. Now, moving on to renewables, right? Side government told you how like we already in status quo developed nations already have enough energy supply. We tell them they have literally considered with the fact that there's enough energy and thus there's no demand for energy. The question is, why do we still need a lot of generation of energy? This is something that they never clarified. Even in the next 50 years of population, even if in the next 50 years the population will be doubled, the efficient energy supply could sustain these lives. Because we tell you that in developed nations they already have enough energy produced towards an extent where there's excessive energy, and we tell you if you want to buy into the idea of the population will increase, this excessive energy can be beneficial for that increase at the end of the day. Second rebuttal is how we talk about like extracting materials for building renewable like infrastructure is going to be inherently harmful. We tell you that sure, whatever our government said it might on harms of it might be true, but it is not as harmful as building a freaking power plant or like extracting minerals, right? We tell you that building power plants, you literally have to take down trees, and you literally have to harm the soils around surrounding like that power plant. So we tell you it is less harmful if you want to buy into the idea of renewable energy being harmful. Right? Now, moving on towards extension, right? Coming from the leader of opposition, talk about how like excessive nuclear energy will be out of control. We tell you that since there's a lack of linkage here, here's how it looks. The problems here is that how like this excessive nuclear energy is going to be used for colonization, such as creating nuclear weapons. It also looks like it's how like this excessive nuclear energy will cause explosion and like causing a repeat of like Chernobyl. Sure, we live in a world where Chernobyl is in the past, but it's safe to say that it can happen even in this time. What is the importance of this extension? It looks simple. How we actually took down the curtain of risk that our open half has put up, and we tell you that we came out this to take down the vagueness that they provided. Secondly, is how they talk about that's going to is going to stigmatize people to not like the priority of nuclear energy. The extension here looks simple. Who are these people in the first place? These people who advocate for renewable energy and refuse to see environments getting taken out because of the leak of power plants. Now, next, moving on to argumentation, right? The first argument, how considering that they'll be talking about renewable energy a lot, I'll bring your argument, right? Why is under the key phrase downgrading the renewable sectors? Why is this true? Because nuclear is non-renewable. In fact, in status quo, we already have extracted a lot of nuclear resources in these developed nations. What is the guarantee that in the next 50 years we can still extract these nuclear materials? I don't really know about science, but if side government can come up with scientific reasons, they can run on this layer of analysis, but we tell you that it's way too late for it to be run on the way. sure, renewable energy is not as efficient as nuclear energy, but we tell you that you can still buy into the idea of we need to prioritize on nuclear energy, because first, renewable energy, bro, it never runs out compared to nuclear energy. Sure, it's not going to be as efficient, but then again, it is infinite. The impacts of this look simple. How we're going to neglect on renewable sectors, right? Because in a world where renewable energy is infinite, you not investing in them will lead to obstruction that side government claim on this renewable energy, such as not being as efficient as nuclear energy. These investments could literally allow the renewable sectors to increase their efficiency. Now, moving on to second argument on how these developed nations itself already has enough energy resources. This is going to be my second argument. Why do we say this? I'll give you a few layers of analysis. France literally have 80% of their energy supplied from nuclear energy. USA have enough power plants to sustain life in high density areas, where even in low density areas where there is no nuclear energy, but the alternatives that exist are already enough, providing enough energy, such as the Maryland city that only use renewable energy, and their residents are still satisfied with it. We tell you the investments cannot just be allocated for these nuclear energy resources, because in the next 50 years, God claim that the population will increase. This is literally them shooting themselves in the foot, because they claim that we already have enough energy generation, and we tell you that is enough to say that there is no need to rush investments on nuclear energy at the end of the day. The impact is so simple, how it downgrades and takes down the necessity of investing wasting people taxes for nuclear energy. Even if Gulf claim taxes will come back towards the generation of nuclear energy, that is not the satisfaction of residents. We tell you that they need investments for better infrastructure, allocation of funds for medium-sized enterprises and stuff we tell you so far, we have a clear vision of how this will be. For all those reasons, sideway closing opposition.
I would like to thank the member of opposition for the fine speech. Now, to close off the government side of the House, I'd like to call upon the government whip. Here.
Hello, can I confirm that I'm audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, few eyes in chat, thanks. I'm going to start off with a quote by former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He says nuclear energy is a scientific achievement of all humanity. What side opposition is trying to do is to take down this scientific achievement of all humanity. We think that's egregious. We think the harms are immense. We do not think that their side should win this debate today. So like what Daniel has said, opening half has already been locked out for a few reasons. I'm just going to recap in case someone didn't hear. First, nuclear energy is simply better because it's less land use, less harms ecosystem, and less operational emissions. Second, they're strategically locked out because of the fact that the question here, Judge, is not really about whether nuclear energy is viable. The larger question is about the environment. The larger question is which side can protect the environment better. The larger question is which side can ensure that humanity will to be lived on and not be destroyed by climate change because we're mining too much coal. That's the most important question. We think we are able to answer that question by saying we are the side. Closing government is the side that's able to alleviate humanity of all these climate problems. We are able to create true change. None of them are able to do that. That's why we win. So I'm going to rebut closing opposition really quickly. What they essentially say in their entire speech is that they have developed countries have enough energy. Nuclear energy is unsafe. Two things. That's all. And all of this, Daniel's already told you why it's so irrelevant inside of his speech. I'm just going to recap a bit. First thing, they never respond to our extension, our unique contribution on social impact. The question is about the climate, like I've already said, down the bench. Our claim is that number one, nuclear is clean, and number two, that nuclear has great potential for social impact. Daniel gave me several keys. I'm going to hash them, and I'm going to add on to them later on. But the member of opposition spends his entire speech talking about irrelevant material that's rebutting opening or whatever. We think that's unstrategic as a one, because we've already locked them out. And number two, they lack engagement with our case, and that strategically unsound. So what's important in this debate is two things. Number one, it's a social impact that we are able to create. Number two, it's a technological advancement that our side is uniquely able to strive for. Why does their extension fall? Because number one, it's fallacious. They say, oh, Chernobyl is going to happen again. But just because, lightning killed people doesn't mean that electricity is unsafe. In the same vein of logic, just because an accident happened doesn't mean that nuclear energy is unsafe. You can get squashed by a solar panel. Does that mean that solar energy is unsafe? I didn't think so. So this is fallacious. regulations. Secondly, their extension doesn't directly engage with what we have to say. Our entire case was about how it's really not just about nuclear energy, but it's also about the social change that nuclear energy can drive. They don't respond to this. They just say, oh, but kill people. I'm sorry, that's not going to cut it. So why does closing opposition lose this debate as well? First, there's absolutely no response to our unique contribution about social impact and technological advancement. Second thing, they actually just ignore our material. They continue dishing out the same unstrategic stuff that opening opposition has been talking about. They offer no new alternative. That's why they lose. So I'm going to rehash a bit of our own case. So they say that, in the opening half of this debate, what they're talking about essentially is whether nuclear energy is good or bad. Of course, we stand opening government. We think that nuclear energy is great, but the impact doesn't end there. The impact, we think, the more important impact is few tiers. First, on job creation, this is pretty intuitive. A lot of traditional jobs like coal mining are already losing and being phased out anyways. We think this is going to benefit the economy. Second thing, prompts more investment and research in STEM, and this also prompts more investment into the environment as well as research projects which concern the environment as well as other forms of renewable energy. Crucially, why nuclear energy is able to do this is because, number one, it's already deeply rooted into our infrastructure. For example, France has like 70% of its energy. It all comes from nuclear energy. This is why we think it's very, very easy for already developed countries to continue building on to their existing infrastructure to drive more change, to drive more technological advancements. This is crucially one point. Second thing, because of this precedent of investing in nuclear energy, it will be much, much easier for other related researchers to receive funding. So for example, if I want to research on a new kind of renewable energy, the government is likely going to let me do that because the government already has the precedent of allowing investments in nuclear energy. So this means more people get to explore more different areas of research inside of renewable energy. This means more renewable energy, more alternatives, more change, more technological advancement. I can't say why we win enough because we just win this debate wholeheartedly. Second thing, they're on their side, they don't get this because they don't have the precedent. They keep blocking nuclear energy to say, oh, people are going to be scared. People don't want it. If you keep doing that, what's going to happen is nothing is going to happen. No change is going to be created. On their side, they're just going to fearmonger their people. They're going to cower like a little coward under their little office table inside their little government, central, execution branch or something. While our side, we're actually able to drive change because we are willing to put the money into a existing, already very powerful infrastructure in order for us to galvanize more kinds of technological advancement. So structurally and principally, our side has already won this on technological advancement because we've concretely proved to you how we are actually able to do this. No other team is able to do this. Closing government wins on this respect. But before that, I'll take a point from opening opposition. Okay, no point. Okay, I'll just continue. So third, why we win, because of extension, there's a sphere of influence. As Daniel has really talked to you about this, developed nations wield great amounts of geopolitical capital. They allow for the influence of smaller nations within the sphere of influence to adopt this. So for example, let's say the United States decide to adopt nuclear power. What they're going to do is that within, say, the G20 or within their sphere of influence inside of South Asia and Southeast Asia, they're able to drive more change within these other nations as well because of the geopolitical capital they're able to create. They're able to fund these small nations. They're able to provide technology to these small nations. For example, they can help countries in Southeast Asia build their own nuclear power plants, for example. This is what's going to happen on our side. And nothing like this is going to happen on their side because they don't even want to start investing into it in the first place. This is why we are actually able to create global change and not just regional change as they posit. So next thing, we also have easier globalization of clean energy. Same vein of logic. If the United States wields some sort of clean energy, it's able to utilize its geopolitical leverage. This is more efficient and more effective on our side and our side only because of our unique contribution. Last thing on social impact on a micro scale. This is very, very important crucially because this is long term. None of the other teams talk about the social impact that's able to be driven by nuclear energy. What this means is that whatever we do, we are able to galvanize the everyday individual to actually play a part towards protecting our environment because they're going to see, oh, our government is doing this. Our government is caring about our environment. We are going to do something about it. What they're going to do is they're going to do little things. They're going to play their part in saving the environment or whatever. They're going to turn off their air conditioners when it's not that hot. They're going to stop using that much electricity. They're not going to shower for that long to save water. All those things is only going to happen on our side because we are able to properly galvanize. We're able to properly send a strong message to our people that, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the future. Clean energy is the future. This is why closing government wins this debate.
I would like to thank the government whip for the fine speech Now, to close off the debate, I would like to call upon the opposition whip here.
Give me a sec to arrange my papers. Okay. Now, I'll be starting. For that, I'll take my POIs verbally, so just open your mic. I won't look to the chat. So I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, we think that this debate has been so far-fetched by side of government, considering the fact that the only thing they've given to you coming from closing and opening was that they only given you a full PowerPoint slide on how essentially nuclear energy is essentially beneficial to society or like to countries. But we don't, and we concede to that fact, but we have to realize that this debate is not about whether or not you should start investing in it. This debate is whether or not you should invest more in it. Considering the fact that they don't understand it, we tell you they fall short. Now, before that, three simple things I'll be doing in today's debate. The first, I'll be responding towards the politic ideas coming to the side of the government. Secondly, I'll be comparing the issues and clashes in today's debate. Lastly, I'll be doing some housekeeping for you today, proving to you why we take today's debate. Now, the first, let's take a look towards the closing side, towards the side of the government, right? Okay, they tell you a few things, but the two most important things that they tell you is that the first is how they essentially generate more social impact towards like globally, and secondly, how they essentially have more technological advancement. Now, let's take a look at social impact. Now, two layers towards how they tell you that essentially on their side of the house, they have people, doing these everyday acts. For instance, they have people be more like cautious on their energy, like on their electrical use, on their energy use, like how you not shower that much anymore. First of all, this is so far-fetched considering the fact that you cannot suddenly expect people to suddenly listen to the message that the government is trying to send. Now, second, on the idea of how they're essentially trying to generate a social impact. First of all, how do you really think there's the incentive of these developed nations to suddenly invest towards these smaller countries to generate this nuclear energy? We think not. Even if we were to say that they wanted to, generate this networking for this social influence, we tell you that this is actually not the case. Considering the fact that there is much other ways for you to, generate this political influence, we tell you that the side of government completely false. Second of all, regarding on technological advancement, right? First of all, we already proven to you how essentially these nations itself are not just about to start to invest in this nuclear energy. Rather, it's more about them trying to invest more towards them. Like for instance, like France. France is already investing towards it. So we tell you on side of opposition, what's the necessity for them to invest more towards it? They don't prove that to you in any speeches, right? Now, let's take a look at what opening for you. What opening gave to you was fairly simple. This debate was not about whether or not nuclear energy is better than renewable energy. Rather, this debate is whether or not this developed nation itself should invest towards it. Which we tell you on side of opening and closing, they fail to actually do it to that. Even if we were to say closing tries to tell you that they have more social impact for networking, even if they were to tell you that they have this unique social impact and this technological advancement, and you can see for instance the US funding these small nations, we tell you that that's not their incentive to do so. So we tell you their case false. Now let's take a look towards the one and only issue and clash in today's debate. The first issue on whether or not, the first issue on which side actually has better allocation of the investments of the resources. Now we tell you on side of opposition that these resources could have been invested in something that's much more better. Considering the fact that you're investing using the money coming from the taxpayers, we tell you that obviously it's going to be something that people are not happy about. Considering the fact that energy itself is not the main priority coming from the citizens, we tell you that these resources could have been invested to something which is more important. For instance, things like healthcare, things like education. And we tell you that things like renewable energy development itself is much more sustainable and is much more safer. Considering the fact that side government itself tells you that there's going to be this considering the fact that side government itself has to concede towards the fact that people will still never there will still be a concern with nuclear energy, we say that it's still better. We still say that on an even if case scenario, we tell you that renewable energy is still much more better to invest more towards to. Now let's take a look. Let's take a look towards what our openings have done and why we rank higher above them, right? Okay, what openings have done for you was really simple. The only thing our opening side tells you, and we comment them for them, is that they tell us that nuclear energy requires us to mine these resources, and they tell you things like, for instance, the excessive energy will go out of control, and there's going to be international tension. My first speaker already told you how essentially these things are true and better on outside of the house, and next you also have to realize, panel, that only thing that the whole case coming from government is just contingent upon the idea that there's this check and balances, there's this precaution, that there's over-regulations, for this nuclear energy, without actually giving you any clear analysis as to why this nuclear energy is even important in the first place. Just because you tell us that people essentially are going to, grow their populations in the near 50 years, we tell you that that's not essentially enough for you to actually, just like prove to us how essentially this energy is even, so important. Considering the fact that the main priority or like the main demand coming from society itself is not really energy, we say that this is essentially not even necessary towards the government to, invest in, right? Now, okay, let's take a look towards why our side, ranks. Let's take a look towards why our side, wins this debate and why our material is so debate winning, right? Okay, my first speaker has already proven to how essentially the downgrade. My first speaker has already proven to how essentially by investing more towards this nuclear energy, you're basically downgrading the other sectors that should have been invested more towards. For instance, like my first speaker has already proven to you, for instance, like the cost of living, healthcare, education, which we think even in developed nations is lacking, right? So we tell you that it's much more important for you to invest towards these sectors rather than you just like trying to invest towards, a whole power plant that you have to take out so much money and so much time to, invest in. And now, even if we were to play with the idea coming from government that on their side also you have less exploitation of workers, right, compared to, let's say coal, right? We say that, yeah, even if you have less exploitation, at the end of the day, these workers itself are the ones who are trying to, generate their money. So we don't think that this exploitation itself is even that bad, right? Okay, now, let's compare the impacts on both sides of the house. Okay, the only impact that we get from side of government is that the nuclear energy on their side of the house is suddenly, the harms are mitigated and such, right? We tell you that this is essentially untrue, considering the fact that yes, you might mitigate the harms, but we still tell you the harms are still there. We tell you that is what essentially disincentivizes, the society itself to, be satisfied with it, right? And we tell you that the impact towards outside house is really simple. We tell you that considering the fact that there's a lackluster of, impact coming from our government, that they try to prove to you how essentially it's essentially important, right? We tell you that already proves to you how essentially there's no actual urgency for you to invest towards nuclear energy in the first place. And we tell you that because of the fact that they don't prove that to you, we tell you that they completely don't stand to win this debate. Because of the fact that they don't do that, we tell you that they don't win, right? Okay, now let's weigh out like all the arguments in today's debate, right? Okay, what we proved to you was how essentially you're downgrading the whole sectors. I proved to you how like it's essentially just like internationally unsafe or like such things like that, right? We're proving to you how these things are going to happen, especially in 50 years, considering the fact that just because they tell you there's going to be precautions and there's going to be like check and balances, we tell you that is not essentially a guarantee that these things would happen. We tell you that these things still have a large percentage to happen. And considering the fact that even if we want to play on the idea that this is a debate that's about nuclear energy versus renewable energy, we tell you that renewable energy still provides a good amount of energy, considering the fact that it does not require you to have that much to use that much money, and considering the fact that side government tries to push the idea that renewable energy needs that like a large amount of surface area, we tell you that it's essentially not even that bad, considering the fact that you're just putting the solar panels on the roofs on buildings, and you're putting like wind turbines on like the mere gaps between houses. We don't think that's essentially a problem, right? Now, considering I have like 30 seconds left in my speech, I just want to tell you that this debate was never about whether or not nuclear energy is bad or good. We concede to the fact that yes, it is good, but we try to tell you how essentially it's not that urgent, and we'll try to also prove to you how essentially all sides of this house don't understand today's debate, and for all those reasons, side with closing out. Thanks. Support. Okay.
Alright. I'd like to thank the opposition whip for the fine speech, and I believe that closes off this debate. So you may cross the house. I would like to request for the debaters to please go back to the main room and wait for further announcements while my panelists and I will be convening in this room.